Let's talk about cube-style monitors like this Avantone Pro Mixcube, what they sound like, why you should have one in your mixing setup, and why you usually only see one of them in the studio. In general, a cube-style speaker like this allows you to hear your mix in a relatively uncolored way because of its full-range, single-driver, closed-box design. In other words, this single speaker is it. There's no tweeter or bass port that's going to introduce distortion or time smearing to the sound, and it allows you to hear your mix in a relatively unfiltered and raw way. So, given this design, what does this thing actually sound like? Having owned this little guy for the past couple years and mixing on it, I can tell you from firsthand experience that it sounds pretty terrible, but in a very particular way. Similar in spirit to the Yamaha NS10s, the Mixcubes really do sound like a cheap Bluetooth speaker, or as I've described the NS10s in the past, maybe playing your music through a styrofoam bowl. They're very bass efficient and very mid-range forward, and they make you work extra hard to make your mix sound good on them, with the philosophy that if it sounds good on this, it'll sound good on anything. And this also goes to the notion of why you usually only see one of them in the studio, because they're often used to check your mix in mono, to make sure that the most central aspects of your mix and the things that are usually pan center, such as the vocals, the snare, the kick, and the bass, that they have clarity and that they don't overlap each other and that they survive in mono and that the mix in general survives in mono, which would replicate somebody listening to it on their phone, for example, or a mono Bluetooth speaker. For me personally, I find myself being able to really easily dial in the correct level of my vocals when I'm using the Mixcube, as well as the correct ratio of wet to dry with my effects overall in the mix. And then lastly, the Mixcubes have a pretty revealing and harsh mid-range, and it allows me to really dial in the amount of saturation and multiband compression that I need to use on harsh elements within the mix to get the mix to translate better at louder volumes and outside of the studio in general. So if you can pick one of these up, I highly recommend it. It might be just what you need to take your mixes to the next level. Follow me for more mixing tips.